Imagine being trapped in a gilded cage where every breath you take is monitored, where strangers watch you dress, eat, and even give birth, where the very luxury that surrounds you becomes a suffocating prison of protocol and public humiliation. What if I told you that, behind the glittering facade of Versailles, the most famous queen in history lived a life so disturbing, so utterly dehumanizing, that it would drive her to desperate acts of rebellion that ultimately sealed her fate? Today, we're uncovering the heartbreaking, unbelievable, sometimes truly unsettling secrets hidden within Marie Antoinette's private chambers at Versailles. The dark side of absolute monarchy wasn't just about politics and power. It was about the complete destruction of human dignity, privacy, and sanity. You won't believe the shocking rituals, invasive ceremonies, and psychological torture that this teenage girl endured daily behind closed doors. By the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why revolution wasn't just inevitable, it was merciful. Marie Antoinette arrived at Versailles in 1770. As a 14-year-old Austrian princess, thrust into the most elaborate and oppressive court system in European history. The Palace of Versailles wasn't just a residence. It was a carefully orchestrated theater of power where every aspect of royal life was performed for an audience of nobles, servants, and foreign dignitaries. What we're about to explore comes from the detailed court records, personal letters, to eyewitness accounts that reveal the horrifying reality behind the grandeur. Be warned, some of these historical truths are deeply disturbing and show just how far humanity will go in the name of tradition and power. Number 5. The lever. Daily humiliation disguised as honor. Starting off at number 5, we have the lever. The daily ritual of watching the queen wake up and get dressed. Marie Antoinette couldn't simply open her eyes and put on clothes like a normal person. Instead, every morning at precisely 8 a.m., her chamber doors would swing open to admit dozens of courtiers, all ranked by their level of nobility and their right to witness her most vulnerable moments. The queen would lie motionless in her massive bed, surrounded by heavy curtains, while court officials filed in according to strict protocol. First came the princesses of the blood, then the duchesses, then the simple countesses, all gathering around her bed like vultures circling prey. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't even acknowledge their presence until the chief lady of the bedchamber gave her permission to rise. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Once she finally sat up, Marie Antoinette couldn't dress herself. The act of putting on clothes became a bizarre ceremony where different nobles had the honor of handing her different garments. The Duchess of Polignac might have the privilege of handing her the chemise, while another lady held the stockings, and yet another the corset. If a higher-ranking noble entered during the process, everything had to stop. The queen would stand there, half-naked and shivering, while the garments were passed up the chain of command to the person with the highest rank. Antoinette once stood completely naked for over an hour in the freezing chambers because 2 duchesses couldn't agree on who had the right to hand her the chemise. She nearly fainted from the cold, but protocol demanded that she remain perfectly still and silent. This wasn't honor. It was systematic dehumanization disguised as tradition. The psychological impact was devastating. To her mother, Marie Antoinette described feeling like a doll being dressed by children, and longed for the simple privacy of putting on her own clothes. But this daily humiliation was just the beginning of her nightmare at Versailles. Number 4. The couture. Watched even in sleep at number 4. We discover the couture, the evening ritual that was even more invasive than the morning ceremony. If you thought being watched while getting dressed was bad, imagine being observed while undressing and going to bed. Every night, the same crowd of nobles would gather in Marie Antoinette's bedchamber to watch her prepare for sleep. The queen couldn't simply change into nightclothes and slip into bed. Instead, she had to endure another elaborate ceremony where her day clothes were removed piece by piece, again handed between different nobles according to their rank. But the truly horrifying part came next. She had to be put to bed like a child, with courtiers arranging her nightgown, adjusting her pillows, and even positioning her limbs in the proper royal sleeping posture. The most disturbing detail? The courtiers wouldn't leave, would stand around her bed watching her lie there, waiting for her to fall asleep. Some would whisper among themselves, discussing court gossip or politics while she lay there trying to ignore them.
Us.
Would simply stare, as if the queen were some exotic animal in a zoo. Marie Antoinette suffered from chronic insomnia, and who could blame her? How could anyone sleep with dozens of people watching, whispering, and judging? In her desperate letters to her mother, she wrote, "I cannot rest, for even in my dreams I feel their eyes upon me." The lack of sleep began to affect her appearance, her mood, and her decision-making abilities. Court physicians prescribed laudanum to help her sleep, beginning a dangerous dependency that would plague her for years. The psychological torture was so severe that Marie Antoinette began sneaking out of her formal bedchamber after the couture ceremony, crawling through hidden passages to sleep in a tiny servant's room, where she could finally close her eyes without being observed. When this was discovered, she was punished by having even more courtiers assigned to watch her, ensuring she could never escape their gaze again. Number 3, the bathroom rituals, no privacy. Even for basic needs coming in at number 3, we enter the realm of the truly shocking, the bathroom rituals that stripped away every shred of human dignity. Marie Antoinette couldn't use the toilet, take a bath, or perform any basic bodily function without an audience of nobles watching her every move. The queen's bathroom was not a private space, but another theater for court ceremony, and she needed to relieve herself. She had to use a special chair called a chaise percée, essentially a throne with a chamber pot built into the seat, but she couldn't sit down alone. The chief lady of the bedchamber had to be present, along with at least 2 other ladies in waiting, to hand her the necessary items and ensure she maintained proper posture even while using the toilet. The bathing ceremonies were even more disturbing. Marie Antoinette's monthly baths were elaborate events that required the presence of multiple courtiers, physicians, and even foreign ambassadors on special occasions. She had to sit naked in a tub while servants poured water over her body, but she couldn't wash herself. Different nobles had the privilege of soaping different parts of her body. One might wash her arms, another her back, another her hair. But here's the detail that will truly shock you: Marie Antoinette's menstrual cycles were monitored and recorded by court physicians as a matter of state business. Every month, doctors would examine her undergarments, record the details of her cycle, and report to the king and his advisors about her fertility. When she was late, it became a matter of international diplomacy. When she had cramps, foreign ambassadors were informed. Her most intimate bodily functions were literally matters of state. The queen's desperate attempts to find privacy led to increasingly creative solutions. She had secret passages built behind her bathroom walls, allowing her to occasionally escape, to use a simple chamber pot alone. But when these tunnels were discovered, she was accused of plotting against the state. Her basic human need for privacy was twisted into evidence of treason. Number 2, the birth spectacle. Labor as public entertainment tech. Number 2. We reach perhaps the most horrifying violation of human dignity in royal history: the public birth ceremonies. When Marie Antoinette went into labor, it wasn't a private medical event, but a state spectacle that traumatized her so deeply she never fully recovered. Royal births at Versailles were considered public events because the legitimacy of the heir had to be witnessed by the nobility. This meant that when Marie Antoinette's labor began, the doors to her chamber were thrown open to admit not just doctors and midwives, but dozens of courtiers, foreign ambassadors, church officials, and even random nobles who had paid for the privilege of watching. During the birth of her first child, the Dauphin Louis Joseph, over 200 people crowded into her bedchamber. They climbed on furniture, pushed against each other, and created such chaos that Marie Antoinette couldn't breathe. The room was so packed that when she began hemorrhaging after the birth, the doctors couldn't reach her bedside. Windows had to be broken to let in air. Several courtiers fainted from the heat and smell. But the psychological trauma was even worse than the physical danger. Marie Antoinette had to endure hours of labor pain while maintaining perfect composure. In front of hundreds of strangers, she couldn't scream, couldn't cry, couldn't even grimace without it being noted and discussed. Court records describe her maintaining perfect royal dignity while giving birth, but her private letters reveal the truth. She was terrified, humiliated, and in agony. The worst part? This happened 4 times. With each subsequent birth, the crowds grew larger and more invasive. Foreign dignitaries began treating royal births as tourist attractions, traveling from across Europe to witness the spectacle. Marie Antoinette begged her husband to limit the attendance, but he refused, saying it was necessary for the legitimacy of the monarchy. After her 4th birth, Marie Antoinette suffered what would today be recognized as severe postpartum depression. In PTSD, she became increasingly reclusive, paranoid, and desperate for privacy. Her behavior became erratic, leading to the wild spending and social isolation that would eventually fuel revolutionary hatred against her. Number 1, the inspection, the most intimate violation. And finally, at number 1, we reach the most shocking and disturbing secret of Marie Antoinette's chambers, the monthly inspection ritual that violated her in ways that would be considered sexual assault by today's standards. As a foreign princess, whose primary duty was to produce heirs for France, Marie Antoinette's body was not considered her own. Every month, she had to undergo a physical examination by court physicians to assess her fertility, health, and most shockingly, her virginity status even after marriage. This wasn't a private medical examination, but a state ceremony witnessed by multiple officials. The Queen had to lie on a special examination table while male physicians conducted intimate examinations of her body. But here's the detail that will horrify you. These examinations were described in detailed written reports that were circulated among court officials, foreign ambassadors, and even members of the public. Her most private anatomy was discussed in state documents like military intelligence. When Marie Antoinette failed to become pregnant immediately after her marriage, these examinations became even more invasive and frequent. Physicians would insert instruments, take measurements, and even perform procedures that caused her significant pain. All of this was done without anesthesia, without her consent, and with multiple witnesses present. The psychological impact was devastating. Marie Antoinette began experiencing what we would now recognize as panic attacks whenever she saw the court physicians. She would hide in her private apartments, refuse to eat, and sometimes injure herself rather than submit to the examinations. Her desperate letters to her mother describe feeling like a breeding animal, a longing for death, rather than continued humiliation. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect was that these examination reports were eventually used against her during the Revolution. Intimate details about her body, her health, and her private struggles were read aloud during her trial as evidence of her foreign corruption of the French monarchy. The very violations she had endured as a victim became twisted into proof of her guilt. The final insult came when revolutionary pamphlets began circulating, graphic descriptions of her body based on these medical reports. The woman who had been denied privacy her entire life had her most intimate secrets broadcast to the entire nation as entertainment conclusion. From the gilded halls of Versailles to the blood-soaked streets of revolutionary Paris, Marie Antoinette's story reminds us that absolute power corrupts absolutely, not just those who wield it, but those who are crushed beneath it. Her chambers weren't filled with the luxuries we imagine, but with the suffocating weight of tradition, protocol, systematic dehumanization. The teenage girl who arrived from Austria full of hope and dreams was slowly destroyed by a system that treated her as public property rather than a human being. Her desperate attempts to find privacy, dignity, and simple human connection were twisted into evidence of treason. Perhaps the real tragedy isn't that Marie Antoinette lost her head to the guillotine, but that she lost her humanity long before she ever reached the scaffold. These secrets remind us that behind every throne, every crown, in every palace lies the fundamental truth that power without compassion creates monsters. And Marie Antoinette was not the monster, but its victim. Her story forces us to ask, in our own age of public scrutiny and social media, how different are we from the courtiers who watched her every move? If this dark dive into royal history shocked you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more disturbing secrets from the past. And let me know in the comments what other historical figures do you think lived lives far different from what we've been told.